For more insight into the political situation in Guatemala, I'm joined now by Joseph Humire. He's Executive Director at the Center for a Free Society. Welcome back to our broadcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure as always.
They're calling this the Guatemalan Spring. Voters are going to the polls. We don't expect to have a clear winner. We expect this to go into a runoff. Let's talk about how interesting that it is that this all began with the Facebook protest that was organized in a very peaceful way.
Yeah, it's a social media revolution that's taken over the entire world. I think it gives a voice to others that usually don't have it, and it gets exposure to the public that perhaps wouldn't have that exposure. It increases transparency. So we're seeing in Guatemala, and first I think we need to commend the Guatemalans for following a constitutional process here. They're taking protests, but they're taking them peacefully, and they're not looking for violence, and they're not looking to just radically change the government. They're looking to rid the people and the politicians that are involved in the corruption, but into a process of reform that's going to be done democratically and, most importantly, legally and constitutionally.
Otto Perez Molina is now being investigated. Is it important for them to keep up these peaceful demonstrations?
Absolutely. I mean, I think Guatemala could serve a lesson to the rest of Latin America, who's also looking at very intense corruption charges of their own politicians. Brazil, for example, is having a tremendous amount of pressure over their politicians over charges of big companies like Odebrecht that are involved in massive corruption scandals, Peru, Chile, and others. So I think Guatemala could set the tone and the example to say that we can fix our problems internally, going through legal processes and doing it democratically and peacefully if they maintain this type of balance throughout the entire election period. What
is the best case scenario for Guatemalans coming out of this election?
Well, I think this specific election, I think the best case scenario is they get a Democratic the elected successor to Otto Perez Molina. He takes office in January, and then they do a complete overhaul of the reforms in the country, not just in the reforms with the anti-corruption and the things that led to this scandal, but also reforms in the actual electoral process. One of the things you won't know is that aside from the president, there's also going to be elected parliamentarians and congressmen. When you elect congressmen in Guatemala, you don't elect the individual, you elect the party. And I think there's certain things like that that need to be reformed so people have more accountability of who the representatives actually are. So I think a top-down reform is going to be needed.
What is the future for Otto Perez Molina, do you feel like?
Unfortunately, it doesn't look very bright. His future looks potential. Well, obviously, he's not going to be president. I think his presidency has been disgraced. He's probably looking at some jail time, and his vice president's already in jail. And so he may be looking at a sentence. He might make a plea bargain, and so he may not do a full term. But I don't think it's looking very bright for Perez Molina. But I do commend Perez Molina for doing the right thing, which is not trying to flee the country as other presidents have done in the past in Latin America, and not trying to, manipulate the charges, but facing them in a judicial process.
The Guatemalans clearly were fed up with what they perceived as corruption in their government. In fact, the Congress voted to lift immunity from prosecution, which was huge, all because of these peaceful protests. How did the Guatemalans and the country as a whole get to this point?
Well, I think one of the things that sparks this newfound passion over the anti-corruption, because you could throw a rock in Latin America and hit a corrupt politician, so it's been around forever, but it's the fact of the wealth that they're accumulating, like the images of their houses, the images of their cars, and the lifestyles that they lead.
And it was in their face, and they had enough.
Exactly. I mean, it's in your face. You're seeing it, and some of these politicians throw it in your face, and I think Guatemalans had enough, and that's exactly what they're reacting to today at the elections, at the electoral booth.
Well, it will be interesting to see where we head from here into a possible October runoff.
Absolutely.
Joseph Humire, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.